In this video, you're going to be getting 600% increased damage to hand cannons. Specifically, in this video, we are using this exotic hand cannon called the MALFEASANCE. So you are going to be melting high value targets with ease for this build. And if you guys are into hand cannons, this build is perfect for you. The gameplay that you're seeing on screen, I am using this in end game content. So the recommended power level for these activities is 1840. And my current power is 1830, so I'm 10 levels below that. So be sure to hit that like button and also subscribe. Without further ado, let's get right into it. Let's first start with the exotic armor piece you're going to be using for this build. It is called Lucky Pants. So here's what it does. It would give you 20 airborne effectiveness, 100 handling plus ready speed. So whenever you pull out the hand cannon, it would give you a 60% increased damage per hit for 5.5 seconds. So the more targets you hit, it would cap up to 10, so it would give you 600% increased damage. After the buff runs out, or whenever you swap weapons, you cannot be able to gain stacks or reacquire the damage buff within 10 seconds. And you can tell when you're not going to be able to use this buff is when you see this debuff called Out of Luck. But whenever you see a legally modded holster on the left side of your screen, that's an indicator of when you know that you can be able to proc the buff for this exotic boot. So for the kinetic weapon I'm using for this build is the MALFEASANCE. You can use any other hand cannon you like, but for me, I would like to deal increased damage to Taken enemies because in this season, it's mainly prioritizing in Scorn and Taken enemies. Because for the weapon perk for the MALFEASANCE is Taken Predator. It would deal bonus damage against Taken enemies and Gambit invaders. And here's what it does. It's called Explosive Shadow. Shoot tainted slugs that burrow into combatants. Stacking enough slugs causes them to all explode, stunning surviving combatants, and it's also strong against unstoppable combatants. And this hand cannon also did get a masterwork, so here's what it does. It would give you Vorpal, so it would increase the damage against bosses, vehicles, and guardians with their supers active. So this is a primary weapon, so Vorpal would give you a 20% increased damage by itself as a passive buff for this hand cannon. And the catalyst will also give you plus 20 range. Now onto the hunter subclass, aka the gunslinger. For the super, I do recommend going for Blade Barrage if you want to have the quickest base cooldown for the hunter subclass. But if you do want to fit the theme for the hand cannons, you can switch to Marksman Golden Gun if you like. For the abilities, I do recommend going for Gambler's Dodge because it would give you your melee back whenever you dodge near an enemy, and plus we're going to be getting Radiant for our fragments as well. For the abilities, you can choose any of them you like, but for me, I'm putting Knife Trick because whenever you hit them, it would cause a scorching effect, which will reduce the cooldown for our class ability. And also too, if you would get a precision final blow while you're Radiant with this knife, it would cause targets to explode because of the seasonal artifact mods we're going to be using for this build. So for the solar grenades, if you do want to survive longer in end game content, be sure to put Healing Grenade. Now for the aspects, the first one that I'm using is Knock 'em Down, but all it would do is that it would enhance your blade barrages to launch more projectiles, and also too, whenever you're Radiant, final blows with your equipped throwing knife fully refund your melee energy. And the second one is On Your Mark. Precision final blows grants you and your nearby allies increased weapon handling and reload speed for a short duration, and it would stack up to 3 times. But whenever you activate your class ability, it would immediately give you 3 stacks of On Your Mark. Let's start with the first fragment, is Ember of Torches. Powered melee attacks against combatants make you and your nearby allies radiant, but it would give you minus 10 discipline. So for this, if you do get a melee kill with your knife trick, you would get your melee back. The second fragment is Ember of Singeing. Your class ability recharges faster whenever you scorch targets. So we are going to be using 2 ways to scorch targets. One of them is with our knife trick, and the second one is with our Cartesian coordinate we're going to be using for our energy weapon slot. The third solar fragment is Ember of Solace. Radiant and restoration effects applied to you have increased duration. The next one is Ember of Benevolence. Applying restoration, cure, or radiant to allies grants increased grenade, melee, and class ability regeneration for a short time. And you're also going to be getting minus 10 discipline if you have this one on. The last fragment is Ember of Searing. Defeating scorched targets grants melee energy and creates a fire spray, and it would also give you plus 10 recovery. And you guys are probably wondering about, why are we getting melee energy for this fragment? We already have Gambler's Dodge. Well, for me, I would like to spawn in fire sprites, which will decrease the cooldown for my grenades even further. That's pretty much it. But if you guys do not want to use this, you could also go for Ember of Eruption, but for me, I'm sticking with Ember of Searing. Now for the energy weapon, I did already mention that earlier in the video, but I am using Cartesian coordinate just to scorch targets and also give me more of a damage boost when dealing with majors and all of that stuff because of the perks that we are using for this fusion rifle. The first perk for this fusion rifle I do recommend going for is Lead from Gold. Picking up a heavy ammo also grants ammo to this weapon. And the second one is Vorpal, and this is a special weapon, so it would give you a 15% increased damage boost. And again, if you do not have the Cartesian coordinate, you can use any other solar energy weapon you could use. Now onto the power weapon. I'm using a solar rocket launcher. Again, you can use any solar rocket launcher you like, but for me, I'm using this big girthy Apex Predator. And the perks you would want to go for are reconstruction, because it will double up the capacity. So instead of having one in the mag, you're now going to be having two. And the second one is bait and switch. Whenever you deal damage with all of the equipped weapons within a short time, it will give this weapon a damage boost. Onto the seasonal artifact mods that I was using for this build. Let's start with the second column. The first one I'm using is Kindling Trigger. Radiant causes solar weapons to apply Scorch to unscorched combatants. The second one is Blast Radius. Rapid final blows with rocket launchers or grenade launchers grants an armor charge. And the last one is From Whence You Came. Increases ability damage to taken and scorned combatants. On the third column I'm using is Flint Striker. Rapid solar weapon precision hits and rapid solar weapon final blows grants Radiant. The next one is Heart of the Flame. Casting your solar super grants nearby allies Radiant and increases the damage of your super for each nearby ally. And the last one is Wished into Being. While your super is nearly fully charged, ability final blow spawns an orb of power. On the fourth column, the first one is Revitalizing Blast. Causing damage with a solar ability weakens champions and bosses for a short duration. And the last one is Overload Rocket Launchers. Rocket launchers are especially effective against overload champions, and they deal 80% increased damage to overload champions. And the final one on the fifth column is Rays of Precision. While Radiant, solar precision final blows causes combatants to ignite. And remember, I told you guys earlier in the video that you could be able to ignite targets with your melee ability. This is the reason why. So be sure to put this on if you want to get a guaranteed ignition when getting a precision knife kill. So for the champions you could be able to stun for this build is pretty much every champion in the game. For anti-barrier, we are going to be getting Radiant because of our throwing knives, which will affect our Cartesian coordinate. For unstoppable champions, we already have it built in onto the Malfeasance, so yeah. And for the overload champions, as what I already mentioned, for the seasonal artifact mods for the rocket launcher. Onto the stats. I do recommend going for resilience if you're mainly focusing this build for endgame content, in which case I am, so it would give me a 30% damage reduction towards combatants. And the second one I do recommend going for is discipline, because it would decrease the cooldown for your grenades. Here are the main ones that I do want to mention for these armor mods. Let's start with the gauntlets. The first two I'm using is Impact Induction and Focusing Strike. For these two, whenever we deal damage with our melee ability, it would 1 decrease the cooldown for our grenade and 2 decrease the cooldown for our class ability. So it's a 2-in-1. And for the boots, I am using 2 kinetic weapon surges. It would increase our kinetic weapon damage by 17%. And the third one for the leg armor is Recuperation. It would replenish health each time you pick up an orb of power. And on the cloak, I am using Special Finisher. Whenever you get a finisher, it would generate special ammo for the whole team, but it would consume 3 stacks of armor charges. So that's why for the chest, I am using Charged Up to increase my charges up to 4 instead of 3. So if I were to finish a target, if I have 4 charges, it would knock the charges all the way down to 1. So for that 1 charge, I have 15 seconds of that kinetic weapon damage boost. And back onto the cloak, I am using Time Dilation to increase the timing for my armor charges. So instead of it being 10, it is now going to be 15. If you guys have a build in mind and you would like me to make it, be sure to let me know in the comments. It could be a meme build, it could be a broken build, it could be a fun build, any build in general. Just let me know in the comments. If you learned something new for this build, be sure to hit that like button and also subscribe. I hope you guys have a good rest of your day, evening, or afternoon. Take care and peace. Join the Discord!